As you may know, I'm Penny Williams, and this is how I'm going to be doing my portfolio presentation. So the content I mostly focused on was between fall of 2022 and fall of 2023, and I mostly picked out projects that focused on what I learned as a designer and what helped me grow as a designer. So let's jump right into it then. The first project I am showing is my animal identity that I did back in 2022, which was my first semester. During this project, I learned that creating thumbnails and compositions is one of the most important steps when it comes to designing. Without having that open mind, you are more limited to what you are comfortable with instead of venturing into different areas that are going to be more beneficial in those final designs and also within the steps that are after that. My thought process during this project was very back and forth. I was just trying to get a feel for everything, like especially being new to InDesign, Illustrator, all that. The main goal of it was to create a logo based off of an animal of our choosing. And all I knew that I wanted to do was I wanted it to revolve around a cafe. So I was looking at animals that started with the letter C. After reviewing a bunch of choices, the combination of crocodile or croc and cafe sounded best. From then on, I created thumbnails that mostly involved a crocodile and a coffee beverage. I wanted to try out different variations of styles and line types to find the style I wanted to go with. I also wanted to keep more of a softer and friendlier design, so I incorporated that idea into the typography that I was looking into using. On the left, I do have my thumbnails, and on the right, I have the typography that I was looking into. After reviewing and receiving the feedback based off my idealization, I narrowed it down to these 4 comps that were within the same style, but also taking on different forms and approaches. Once these compositions became more refined, I picked out the one that best demonstrated the logo identity, and this is shown in black and white on the right. Finally, I used colors that were a little bit brighter instead of sticking with the darker colors that come with a crocodile and a coffee bean, and created the final logo. I used colors that were a little bit brighter instead of sticking with the darker colors that usually are common within crocodiles, but also coffee beans, and created the final logo. I wanted to make it a lot more inviting and friendly, so I wanted to use something a little bit brighter and more pastel instead of going dark and gloomy. Having the form of a coffee bean and crocodile be combined was the best way I thought I could demonstrate Crocodile Cafe without using any type. It was distinguishable, and that was my main goal. This project as a whole affected me until this day, since I have become a lot more open-minded when creating my thumbnails. And with the styles that I use and the type that I use, I try to combine more with each other and venture out instead of sticking where where I am comfortable with my style. I became more aware that some styles are going to work better for certain designs and not for others, and so on and so forth. And this is especially crucial in the early stages of the development. And I also took into account that different forms are going to be used to get your ideas across. That way it's going to be able to be noticed and stand out without any type being used. This next project is called the Eavesdropping Project, and I did this in spring of 2023. This project taught me that I need to use my imagination sometimes. Specifically, this project, we had to come up with the idea of how we can represent eavesdropping. Eavesdropping can be shown in many different meanings and also be seen from many different perspectives. So as a designer, you need to be more open with that, but also show how you think eavesdropping works instead of using Google's version or what other people think. You need to use your imagination with this. For this project, I personally looked into different ways of how you could eavesdrop, whether it be watching or listening. However, the idea that really came to my head was the idea of seeing into someone's head, since when eavesdropping, you are seeing into what they are thinking a lot of the time. So I roughly drew that out as well. For my in progress, I created the design idea in Illustrator to get a better idea of what I wanted to do. I then brought it up into Photoshop, and I took the little person I made in Illustrator and added some details, imported it into Photoshop, and made a combination of the 2 softwares. That way I had practice with both. After receiving feedback from peers, all I had to do was add a brain to give the full effect of this little guy looking in and eavesdropping on that person and what they're thinking. The final product shows what I personally think eavesdropping is, since you are taking a peek into someone's brain without them knowing. This project helped me to better understand Photoshop, and now I can use the basics of it without a sweat. It also helped me to better myself as a designer, since there was such little feedback that I didn't really know how to move forward. But now sometimes little feedback can be good. It just shows that you need to listen to the little feedback that you get and be applied to the final project. You don't need a lot of feedback in order to make a design good, but you need to take into consideration the feedback that you receive. The next project I'm going to be discussing is from a major project that I did last semester within my group. It is the app logo portion of it, and I mostly focused on this portion of the project because it taught me how important trial and error is when designing a logo. There's going to be constant improvement and adjustments that need to be made due to the size that you are working with. Starting with the thumbnails, I wrote down key words that are in some way linked to the goal of the app. And again, since it was a group project, I only had half. So I included them here on the left. With feedback from my peers and discussion with my partner, we brought in thumbnail 15 to create digitally, but also had a variation. Instead of using an apple, we used a bag. This way we had two options to go with, and since they are in black and white, we didn't yet have the color idea that we wanted to do. But when we sized it down, it didn't end up working. You couldn't see any of the detail, and it just was, you couldn't see it at all, basically. So we had to regroup and come up with a new plan. Next, I have the in progress logos in color with a black and white version as well. However, when adding in the mock-up and sizing it down as shown on the right, the details were very difficult to see and overall very cluttered. You couldn't see what the logo was. You can't even see it here unless I were to zoom in. We were able to get the color scheme that we wanted, however, but for the overall idea and logo, we had to regroup once again. Finally, we have our final logo. Although it is very simple, it was easy to see when you sized it down and also showed what the app we were creating was going to do. We had two color options as shown here, but we later went with the icon on the right since it matched our theme of the app best compared to the other. This project, for me personally, it made me a better designer because it showed me how important it was to communicate the ideas that I had, but also what my partner had, to each other when working within our group. I feel like if my partner and I communicated a little bit better and did this in person, I believe we would have so many different variations to go with so many other outlet options that we could have gone and not been struggling with just what we had presented. This final project I am going to be sharing is my most recent one, which was my series project from last semester, fall of 2023. From this project, it taught me that in some cases you're going to need to narrow down your audience when creating packaging in order for it to be successful. You can't be making packaging that's going to appeal to every single person that's going to see it. For this project, my main goal was to make the idea and concept of getting your period less scary. The kit was to include tampons, liners, and pads, which were the basic necessities that you needed for first getting your period. For my ideation, I mostly focused on the pattern I wanted to do for the boxes and how I was going to achieve that. I then drew up the concept of the draft that I wanted to do, and I wanted to include cute little smiley faces on the product so that it isn't as scary, but it's also showing that, like, hey, it's okay, this is normal, we all get this. I then put the ideas into Illustrator, and on the right were the prototypes and mock-ups of the first version. Each box is the same color and cohesive with each other, but during this in-progress feedback area, I learned that, yeah, it's kind of boring, so I need to mix up some colors, I need to do something because they're just too similar. Here I present a gallery of all the boxes, the final products, and as you can see, each box is going to be different and works best with what it stores. Each color represents a different product, so although they are consistent in design, they are all different in some way. And that is the end of my portfolio. I hope you enjoyed.